My daughter, Chloe, forgot to hang up the phone. It was a simple mistake, the kind anyone could make. She'd called to confirm I was still coming for dinner that Sunday, her voice dripping with that manufactured sweetness she'd adopted over the last year. I'd said yes, of course. After she said her goodbyes, there was a click, but not the clean, final click of a disconnected line. It was the muffled sound of a phone being set down on a table, the microphone still active. I was about to hang up myself when I heard her voice, no longer sweet, but sharp and weary. "He's coming," she sighed. "Honestly, Marcus, I don't know how much longer we can do this." Marcus, my son-in-law, his voice a low rumble of condescension. "It's a means to an end, babe. Just keep him happy. Did you mention the brochures?" I tried. He just gets that look on his face, like he's a million miles away. He's getting so slow, Marcus. It's a full-time job, just making sure he's taken his pills. A lie. I managed my own medication perfectly. "Let him be slow," Marcus said, and I could practically hear the greasy smile in his voice. "The slower he is, the less he'll notice when we start the paperwork." "My guy, Jerry, said the power of attorney is the easy part. Once we have that, we can move on the house. That place has got to be worth $1 million, easy. We sell it, get him into a nice, clean room at Silver Maples, and we're free." Ice. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a physical sensation, a crystalline shard of cold that started in my chest and spread, branching out into my veins, freezing my blood, my muscles, my very soul. My hand, still holding the receiver to my ear, was paralyzed. "A room?" Chloe's voice was softer now, a flicker of something I might have once mistaken for conscience. "It's his home, Marcus. He built it." "He built it, and we're going to cash it in," Marcus scoffed. "It's for his own good. He's a burden, Chloe. A lovely, sweet, increasingly senile burden. It's time for him to go. Think of the trips we could take. Think of paying off the credit cards. Think of not having to spend every other Sunday eating bland pot roast and listening to stories about the good old days." The receiver slipped from my fingers, clattering into its cradle. The connection broke, but the words didn't. The words hung in the quiet of my kitchen, echoing off the oak cabinets I had built and installed 40 years ago. They stained the air, turning it toxic. A burden. My life's work, a cash-in. My home, a room. Something inside me, some vital, load-bearing beam of trust and affection, didn't just crack, it broke. It splintered into 1,000 pieces, and in its place, a terrible, cold silence fell. I stood there for a long time, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. The scent of the roast beef I had been preparing for our own family dinner, a dinner they had just canceled on me for their own planning session, now smelled like rot. I walked over to the oven, turned it off, and slid the roasting pan onto the counter to cool. It was the last meal I would ever prepare for them. This was just the beginning. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair, the one Eleanor always said was molded perfectly to my shape, and I stared into the darkness. The house was quiet, but my mind was screaming. Every fond memory I had of Chloe, every proud moment, was now tainted, recontextualized by that one-sided conversation. Her childhood laughter, her wedding day for which I'd happily drained a good portion of my savings, the way she'd hugged me after her mother died, whispering, "It's just us now, Dad. We'll take care of each other." Was it all a lie, every bit of it? Or was she just weak, a puppet for Marcus's greedy, grasping hands? In the end, it didn't matter. The result was the same. They saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle, an asset to be liquidated. Sometime before dawn, the grief and the shock began to curdle. They fermented into a different emotion, something harder and more useful. It was anger, yes, but a cold, clear anger. A righteous fury. I thought of Eleanor. I thought of her pragmatism, her sharp, discerning eyes that had seen right through Marcus from the day Chloe brought him home. "He has hungry eyes, Roy," she'd told me one evening as we washed dishes together. "He doesn't look at people, he assesses them. Be careful." I had dismissed it as motherly overprotection, I had wanted my daughter to be happy, and Marcus made her happy, or so it seemed. I had ignored Eleanor's wisdom. I had paid for their lavish wedding, helped with the down payment on their house. I now realized they saw as a temporary stepping stone to my own. I had been a fool, a generous, loving, trusting fool. But the man who sat in that armchair as the first gray light of morning filtered through the windows was not a fool anymore. The fool was gone, burned away by the acid of betrayal. What was left was a craftsman, a builder. And I realized then that I had one more thing to build, a trap. A meticulously constructed, perfectly executed trap designed to catch two thieves in the act. My pain wasn't gone. It was just repurposed. It was no longer a weight, but fuel. The blueprints began to form in my mind, clean and precise as any I'd ever drawn up for a house. This would not be a crime of passion. This would be a masterpiece of demolition. Their demolition. The first step, like any good construction project, was to lay a solid foundation. That morning, I didn't call Chloe to ask why they'd stood me up. I didn't mention the phone call. I let the silence sit. Instead, I went to my study and turned on the computer. I didn't search for nursing homes. I searched for lawyers. Specifically, lawyers who specialized in estate litigation and elder law. I spent hours reading reviews, looking for a shark. I found one, Arthur Peterson. The reviews described him as ruthless, unflappable, and a brilliant strategist. He sounded perfect. I called his office and made an appointment for the following day. Next, I went through my financial records. Every check I'd written them, every wire transfer, every loan that was never meant to be paid back. I compiled a list, a neat, alphabetized ledger of my own foolishness. It was a sickening amount of money, enough to have funded a comfortable retirement for Eleanor and me twice over. Seeing it all there, in black and white, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a lifetime of work, of careful saving, of sacrifice. It was about the legacy Eleanor and I had built together, a legacy they intended to burn for a European vacation and a new sports car. That afternoon, I received a text from Chloe. "So sorry about last night, Dad. Something came up suddenly. Hope you weren't waiting for us. Let's do dinner this week, my treat." The phoniness of it was so transparent it was almost comical. I typed back a simple reply. "No problem, sweetheart. Work is work. Let me know when you're free." The mask was in place. I was now playing a part, the slightly confused, ever-forgiving old man they believed me to be. Let them think they were in control. Let them think their plan was proceeding smoothly. The best traps are the ones the prey walks into willingly, convinced it's a safe, warm place. My meeting with Arthur Peterson was in a high-rise building downtown that smelled of money and ambition. His office was minimalist and immaculate, with a large window overlooking the city. He was a man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my first car. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Hayes," he said, gesturing to a leather chair, "your call was intriguing. Tell me everything." And so I did. I told him about Eleanor, about the house, about my career as a master carpenter. I told him about Chloe and Marcus, about my financial generosity over the years. And then I told him about the phone call. I recited the conversation, almost verbatim, my voice steady and cold. As I spoke, I watched him. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, his fingers steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. When I finished, there was a long silence. He stared out the window for a moment, then turned his gaze back to me. "They are audacious," he said, a faint hint of admiration in his tone, "and foolish. Overheard phone calls have undone more powerful people than your son-in-law." "I need to protect myself," I said, "and I need to make a point." A slow smile spread across Peterson's face. "Making a point is my specialty, Mr. Hayes. We will do more than protect you. We will fortify you. We will make you an untouchable fortress, and then we will watch them break their own fists against the walls." He was my kind of man. Over the next 2 hours, we laid out the strategy. The first and most immediate step was to revoke the power of attorney I had signed a few years prior, which gave Chloe control over my affairs if I became incapacitated. It's a dormant threat right now, Peterson explained, but we must kill it before it wakes up. He drew up the revocation documents right then and there. Next, we tackled the finances. We would establish an irrevocable living trust. All my assets, the house, my savings, my investment portfolio, even my classic car would be transferred into this trust. I would be the beneficiary, of course, but the trustee, the person with legal control, would not be a family member. It would be a corporate entity, a sterile and unassailable trust department at a bank. Your daughter will have no legal avenue to touch a single penny, Peterson assured me. She will have as much claim to your assets as I do, which is to say, none at all. The final piece was the house, my house, the primary target of their greed. You love this house, I take it? He asked. I built it, I said simply. My wife drew the plans on our kitchen table. I laid the foundation with my own 2 hands. Every board, every nail has a memory attached. And yet, they see it as a pile of cash. He tapped a pen on his desk. So we will use that. We will allow them to believe they are on the verge of getting what they want. We will let their greed build to a fever pitch. And then, at the moment of their presumed triumph, we will pull the rug out from under them so completely that they won't know which way is up. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in years. The cold anger was still there, but now it had a direction. It was focused, honed to a razor's edge. I had an ally. I had a plan. The game was afoot. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I played my role to perfection. When Chloe called to invite me to that make-up dinner at their house, I accepted with feeble gratitude. I sat at their table, picking at the fancy, overpriced food she served, and listened with a benign smile as they talked about their wonderful lives. Marcus went on and on about a potential promotion at his marketing firm, a fiction I was sure was designed to make him seem successful and important. Chloe peppered the conversation with condescending questions about my well-being. Are you remembering to take your blood pressure medicine, Dad? You seem a bit tired today. I think so, dear, I'd say, feigning a moment of confusion. The blue one in the morning, right? I could see the look they exchanged over my head, a look of shared conspiracy, of triumph. They were so sure they were dealing with a fading old man. They had no idea they were sitting across from a predator. During this time, I was busy. I signed the papers with Peterson, revoking the old power of attorney and establishing the Roy Hayes Irrevocable Trust. I went to my bank and, with the help of a discreet manager Peterson had recommended, began the process of transferring every last cent into new accounts under the trust's name. The bank teller, a young woman who always greeted me with a smile, looked at me with concern as the large sums were moved. I just smiled back. The most difficult part was packing, not physically, but emotionally. I began to systematically dismantle the life Eleanor and I had built within those walls. I packed away her photographs, her collection of porcelain birds, the quilt she had spent a decade making that lay folded on our bed. I boxed up my most cherished woodworking tools, my journals, my father's war medals. I rented a large, climate-controlled storage unit across town under the name of the trust and began moving these pieces of my soul, bit by bit, in the dead of night. The house began to feel cavernous, empty. The echoes of laughter were fading, replaced by a sterile silence. It was a painful process, an amputation of my own past. But every time my resolve wavered, I would just replay their words in my head. A burden, a cash-in, it's time for him to go. And the pain would harden once more into purpose. I also began looking for a new place to live. I didn't want a house. I wanted simplicity. I found a modern 2-bedroom apartment in a new development on the other side of the city. It had a gym, a pool, and, most importantly, a large, well-equipped community workshop. It was clean, anonymous, and had no memories. I signed a lease, paid the deposit with funds from the trust, and arranged for the delivery of new, simple furniture. I was building my ark while the greedy fools of the world were busy dancing in the sun, oblivious to the coming flood. My greatest strategic move, however, was born from a detail I'd almost forgotten. The house Chloe and Marcus lived in, the one I'd given them the down payment for, I hadn't just given them the down payment. I had co-signed the mortgage. When interest rates plummeted a few years back, I'd offered to buy the mortgage outright from the bank to save them the interest. They had leapt at the chance. So, they weren't paying a bank every month. They were paying me, a token amount they called rent, but which was, in fact, a mortgage payment to their own private lender. Legally, I was their landlord. Their home was also my asset, and it was now safely tucked away inside my new trust. They had no idea about the leverage this gave me. It was the ace up my sleeve. The time had come to add a little more fuel to their fire of arrogance. I called Sarah Jenkins, a real estate agent I'd known for years. Sarah was a straight shooter, a widow herself, who had sold several of the custom homes I'd built back in my prime. I trusted her implicitly. I met her for coffee and laid out the entire situation, just as I had with Peterson. She listened, her eyes flashing with anger on my behalf. "The nerve of some people," she muttered, shaking her head. "Roy, you were always too good for this world. What do you need me to do?" "I need a formal appraisal of my house," I said. "A very optimistic one. And I need you to let it slip casually when you're in their neighborhood. Maybe you're showing a house nearby. Let the gossip mill do its work." Sarah's smile was predatory. "Consider it done. I'll get you a number that will make their heads spin. And I happen to have a client looking for a place on their street. I'll be sure to have a very loud phone conversation about market values soaring while I'm putting up the for sale sign." A week later, Chloe called me, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Dad, you'll never guess who I ran into, Sarah Jenkins. She was just down the street. She said houses in our area are going for incredible prices right now. She mentioned your place," she said. "Dad, are you sitting down? She said it could be worth $1.5 million. Maybe more." "Oh my," I said, injecting a note of bewildered wonder into my voice. That's a lot of money." "It's more than a lot, Dad. It's a fortune. It's enough to set you up in the most luxurious retirement community in the state and still have a massive amount left over. We wouldn't have to worry about you for a second. We wouldn't have to worry about your money," is what she meant. "Well, that's certainly something to think about, dear," I said softly. I hung up the phone and allowed myself a small, grim smile. The bait was in the water. The sharks were circling. The final piece of the puzzle was evidence. My word against theirs would devolve into a messy family drama. I needed something irrefutable. I bought a small, high-quality voice-activated recorder, no bigger than my thumb. The next time they invited me over, complaining that my empty house felt sad, I slipped it under a cushion on their sofa before I left. It felt slimy, deceitful. It was a violation of their privacy, but they had violated something far deeper in me. They had violated my trust, my love, my very identity as their father. This was not a game with rules of etiquette. This was war. I retrieved the recorder a few days later, my heart pounding. That night, I sat in my nearly empty house and listened to the recording. It was worse than I could have imagined. They were so confident, so contemptuous. "He totally bought the appraisal," Marcus gloated. "The old fool's practically drooling. Jerry says once we get the power of attorney, we can list the house and have the money in escrow within 60 days. We should take him to look at Silver Maples next week," Chloe said. "We'll frame it as a fun outing. Once he sees how many other old people are there, he'll probably be happy to go." "As long as he signs the papers first," Marcus warned. "Don't let him get buyer's remorse. We need his signature on that POA. We'll tell him it's just for emergencies, so we can help him pay his bills. He's so disorganized now, he'll probably be grateful." They laughed. They laughed at my expense, in their home that I paid for, while plotting to steal mine. The recording was my pillar of strength. It was the cold, hard proof that I was not overreacting. I was not being cruel. I was merely administering justice. Their hubris continued to grow, unchecked. They started treating me less like a person and more like a piece of furniture they were preparing to move. They brought me brochures for Silver Maples, a sterile, beige facility that looked more like a hospital than a home. They pointed out the features, the organized bingo nights, the communal dining hall, the on-site nurse. "Look, Dad," Chloe said, her finger tracing a picture of a bleak, tiny room. "You'd have your own little apartment, no more stairs to worry about, no more yard work. It would be so much easier for you." "It would be so much easier for us," Marcus chimed in before catching himself. "I mean, for us to know you're safe and sound." I just nodded slowly, my face a mask of mild confusion and weary acceptance. "It's a lot to take in, sweetheart. Let me think on it." Every condescending word, every false smile, was another nail in their own coffin. They were so blinded by greed, so convinced of their own cleverness and my senility, that they couldn't see the ground crumbling beneath their feet. They saw an old man losing his faculties. They had no idea they were looking at a judge, patiently waiting to deliver his sentence. The breaking point, the final provocation that told me the time was right to spring the trap, came during a dinner at their house. It was the culmination of weeks of their smug planning. They had invited me over for what they called a family meeting. I knew this was it. This was the night they would push for the power of attorney. Chloe had cooked an elaborate meal, something French with a sauce I couldn't pronounce. It was rich and heavy, and I, a man of simple tastes, could only manage a few bites. I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite gone, my focus entirely on the coming confrontation. Chloe watched me, a frown of theatrical concern on her face. Then she glanced at Marcus, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She put her fork down with a delicate clink. "Dad, we need to talk," she began, her voice taking on a serious, patronizing tone. "We're worried about you. This," she gestured to my barely touched plate, "is a perfect example. You're not eating properly. You seem tired all the time. You can't even cook for your own family anymore." The insult was so brazen, so dismissive of the decades of meals I had cooked, the barbecues I had hosted, the holiday feasts I had prepared, that it almost made me laugh. It was the perfect, arrogant, final straw. I looked up from my plate, letting my gaze drift from her face to Marcus's. I didn't show anger. I didn't show hurt. I simply smiled. It was a calm, quiet, chilling smile. It was a smile they had never seen from me before, and it made them both shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You know, Chloe," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "That's a funny thing to say." I let the silence hang in the air for a beat. "Speaking of family and cooking," I continued, leaning forward slightly, "remember that dinner you were supposed to come to a few weeks ago? The one where you forgot to hang up the phone?" The color drained from Chloe's face. Marcus's smug expression froze, then flickered with confusion and alarm. They were caught off guard. This was not in their script. I pressed on, not giving them a chance to recover. "I feel like we haven't had a proper family dinner in a long time, in my own home. Why don't we fix that? Come over this Sunday, to my house. I have a surprise for you. Consider it a farewell dinner." The word farewell hung in the air like a guillotine. I saw a flash of panic in Chloe's eyes, quickly masked. Marcus narrowed his gaze, suspicion dawning on his face. But their greed was still stronger than their fear. A farewell dinner? Maybe the old man was finally giving in. Maybe this was his dramatic way of agreeing to their plan. "Of course, Dad," Chloe said, forcing a bright smile. "We'd love to. What's the surprise?" "You'll see," I said, rising from the table. "It's something you've wanted for a very long time." I walked out of their house, leaving them in a state of confused anticipation. They thought they were coming to my house on Sunday to claim their prize. They had no idea they were walking into the courtroom for their sentencing. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. When they arrived that Sunday, precisely at 6, I could see the confusion on their faces the moment I opened the door. The house was barren. The entryway table, where a vase of fresh flowers usually sat, was empty. The walls of the living room, once covered with family photos and Eleanor's favorite landscape paintings, were bare, marked only by faint rectangles of lighter paint where the frames had hung. "Dad, what's going on?" Chloe asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Did you get robbed?" "Something like that," I said calmly, gesturing for them to enter. "I've been decluttering, getting rid of things I no longer need. They walked into the dining room. The long oak table I had built was set for 3, but it was a stark setting. No tablecloth, no centerpiece. Just 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, and 3 glasses of water. They looked at each other, a silent, panicked conversation passing between them. This was not the scene of capitulation they had imagined. "Where's the food, Dad?" Marcus asked, trying for a jovial tone that fell completely flat. "Don't tell me your surprise is that we're all going on a diet." "The food is coming," I said, walking over to a small side table. On it sat a stack of 3 manila folders and a small black digital audio player. But first, the appetizer. I sat down at the head of the table, in my usual spot. I motioned for them to sit. They did so hesitantly, their eyes darting around the empty room, as if the ghosts of my furniture were about to leap out at them. "You were right," I began, my voice even and devoid of emotion. "We needed to have a family meeting. You've both been so concerned about my future, so full of helpful suggestions. I thought it was only fair that you be the first to know about the arrangements I've made." I slid one folder across the polished wood to Chloe and another to Marcus. I kept the third for myself. "Go on," I said, "open it." With trembling fingers, Chloe opened the tab. Marcus tore his open impatiently. The first document on top was a legally certified copy of the revocation of power of attorney. I watched Chloe's eyes scan the page, her brow furrowing in confusion, then dawning horror. "What is this?" she whispered, looking up at me. "This cancels everything." "It cancels your presumed authority over my life, yes," I said coolly. "Keep reading." The next set of documents was the charter for the Roy Hayes Irrevocable Trust. They saw the list of assets, the house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, the car, and they saw the name of the trustee, a corporate executive from the Northern Ridge Bank and Trust Company, a stranger. Marcus's face had gone a blotchy, furious red. "You put everything in a trust? Without telling us? Who the hell is this guy?" "He's my trustee," I said simply. "His job is to manage my assets for my sole benefit. He's very professional. He doesn't have hungry eyes." I saw a flicker of recognition in Chloe's face at Eleanor's words, a faint echo of a conversation she was never meant to hear. She paled even further. The final document was the one I had been waiting for. It was a formal eviction notice. It stated clearly that the property at their address, being owned by the Roy Hayes Irrevocable Trust, required them to vacate the premises within 30 days. Chloe dropped the papers as if they were on fire. "Eviction? Dad, this is our house. You can't." "I'm afraid I can," I said. "Or rather, the trust can. You see, you've been living in an asset of the trust while paying a negligible amount of rent, which I might add, has often been late. The trustee has decided that it is no longer a sound investment. You have 30 days to find alternative housing." Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "You old bastard," he roared, his face contorted with rage. "You've been playing us. This whole time you've been playing us." "Sit down, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous command. He was so shocked, he actually obeyed. "The main course hasn't been served yet." I reached out and pressed the play button on the small audio player. The room filled with their own voices, crisp and clear in the sterile silence. "He's a burden, Chloe. It's time for him to go." "My guy, Jerry," said the power of attorney, "is the easy part. The old fool's practically drooling. He's so disorganized now, he'll probably be grateful." I let the entire recording play, every condescending word, every greedy calculation, every dismissive laugh. I watched their faces. Marcus's rage curdled into a stunned, ugly silence. "Chloe," she just broke. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, not the soft, manipulative tears I was used to, but harsh, guttural sobs of complete and utter humiliation. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Chloe's ragged breathing as she cried into her hands. Marcus stared at the audio player on the table as if it were a bomb that had already detonated, and he was just now realizing he was part of the wreckage. His face, which had been red with rage, was now a pasty, sickly white. The bravado, the condescension, the smooth, manipulative charm had all been stripped away, leaving behind something weak and pathetic. Finally, he turned his head slowly, not to me, but to his wife. His voice was a venomous whisper. "This is your fault," he hissed. "Your fault. I told you he wasn't that stupid. I told you to be more careful, but you just had to push him with your stupid fancy dinners and your concerns." Chloe looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "My fault?" she choked out, her voice rising with hysteria. "You're the one who wanted the house. You're the one who called him a burden. You're the one who couldn't wait to get your hands on his money to pay off your debts." "My debts?" Marcus laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "What about your shopping habit? The new car? The trip to Aspen you just had to have? Don't you dare lay this at my feet, you incompetent fool." They started to argue then, a furious, whispered fight right there at my dining room table. They tore into each other like starving wolves, all the hidden resentments and frustrations of their marriage spilling out in a torrent of blame and recrimination. It was raw, it was ugly, and it confirmed everything I had suspected. Theirs was not a partnership of love, but an alliance of greed. And now that the prize had vanished, the alliance was dissolving in a spectacular fashion. I watched them for a moment, feeling nothing. No pity, no lingering affection, not even the satisfaction I thought I would feel. There was just a vast, cold emptiness. I had loved the woman crying across from me with all my heart. I had raised her, protected her, provided for her, and she had been willing to trade all of that for money. Slowly, I stood up. My movement was enough to silence them. They both stopped, their angry, tear-stained faces turning to me. They looked like children, caught in a terrible, unforgivable act. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I looked at Marcus first. "You wanted my house. You wanted my money. But you didn't want the man attached to them. You saw me as a problem to be managed, a lock to be picked." Then I turned my eyes to my daughter, to Chloe. "And you," I said, and my voice was heavy with the weight of 1,000 broken promises. "You let him. You went along with it. You forgot that a father is not a bank account, a home is not a commodity, and love is not something you can fake forever." I picked up a small, pre-packed duffel bag that I had left by the door. It contained a change of clothes and my toothbrush. Everything else I needed was already waiting for me. "You didn't lose me today," I said, my voice quiet but final. "You gave me away, a long time ago. You just didn't realize it." I walked out of the dining room. I didn't look back. I paused at the front door, the door I had hung, and stained myself 4 decades earlier, and put my hand on the knob. "The new owners will be in touch via their lawyer," I said over my shoulder. "Lock up when you leave." And with that, I stepped out into the cool evening air, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't need the drama. I just closed it, and in doing so, I closed the final chapter of a life that no longer existed. Roy Hayes, the doting father and foolish old man, had left the building, and he was never, ever coming back. I didn't drive away immediately. I walked to the end of the block and stood under the shade of an old maple tree, looking back at the house, my house. The lights were on in the dining room, casting a warm glow, a perfect picture of domestic harmony that was now a lie. I saw their silhouettes moving, still arguing, their gestures sharp and frantic. They were trapped in the wreckage they had created, and I was free. A profound sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was liberation. The heavy chain of my own love and obligation, a chain they had used to tether me and weigh me down, had been broken. The burden wasn't me, it was them, and I had finally shrugged it off. I got into my car and drove across town, towards my new life. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, clean, quiet, and blessedly empty of history. I walked in, dropped my duffel bag on the floor, and went to the kitchen. The new refrigerator was stocked with simple things: eggs, bread, cheese, and a bottle of good whiskey. I poured myself a generous measure, no ice, and walked over to the large window in the living room. My apartment was on the 10th floor, and it looked out over the sprawling, glittering lights of the city. It was a view of the future, not the past. There were no ghosts here. No memories stained the walls. It was a blank canvas, and I was the only artist. The next morning I woke up early, as was my habit, but instead of the familiar weight of loneliness, I felt a strange lightness. I made coffee and took it down to the community workshop in the basement of the building. It was a magnificent space, clean and organized, with tools I hadn't used in years. I picked up a block of cherry wood and a chisel and just started to carve, letting my hands remember their old rhythm. The scent of the wood was clean and honest. After a while, another man about my age came in and started working on a lathe. He introduced himself as Frank. We didn't talk much, just shared a quiet understanding, the camaraderie of men who find solace in making things. It was a simple, easy interaction, unburdened by expectation or history. Later, I walked to a small cafe I'd seen down the street. I ordered a black coffee and a croissant and sat by the window, watching the world go by. People bustled past, living their own lives, full of their own dramas and joys. I was just one of them now. Not a patriarch, not a resource, not a burden, just a man. A man with a quiet apartment, a new workshop, and a future that looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. I never heard from Chloe or Marcus directly again. Peterson handled everything. He informed me, with a certain professional satisfaction, that they had tried to contest the trust, but were laughed out of every law office they approached. They vacated their house on the 30th day, leaving it a mess, according to the cleanup crew the trust sent in. I told Peterson to sell it. Sometimes I thought of Chloe. I thought of the little girl with scraped knees who I used to carry on my shoulders. I mourned for her, for the daughter I had lost, long before I ever overheard that phone call. But I did not mourn for the woman she had become. That woman was a stranger to me. I sat there in the cafe sipping my coffee, the morning sun warm on my face. For the first time in years, the silence in my head wasn't lonely. It wasn't the silence of loss, haunted by the memory of Eleanor. It was a different kind of silence. It was peaceful. It was clean. It was mine. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.